Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the guitarist John McKay, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Was in Siouxsie and the Banshees in the late 70s and appeared on the first two studio albums, and has done various bits and pieces ever since. But there's going to be a new album of his work coming out May 2025, titled Sixes and Sevens, which is material that he recorded and wrote during the 80s as various kind of different lineups, and also as Zorgabor. But you're going to find out more about all those interesting things and about this new album. I will put a link in the notes below, like I said, and find out where he might be playing very soon, the summer of 2025. Anyway, yes, make notes, I will test you later. So, after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject that was the early formative years. John, it's over to you.
I mean, in terms of teenage, it was Hot Love, T-Rex.
Right.
But the first single I ever wanted to buy was Black Knight by Deep Purple.
Right.
I actually lived in Dublin at the time because my family had moved there we were there for a few years. And I cycled into Dublin from the suburb we were living in Clontarf, and went to the only record shop I knew of. And he said, I'm afraid we only sell second-hand records. That's how much I knew about records. So I came home empty-handed.
Right.
But the one that really got me was Hot Love.
Yes.
And so I this time went to a real record shop and bought it. And the first album I ever bought was Electric Warrior.
Blimey, it was T-Rex all the way. So did you come from a musical family at all? Did you have anybody in the family who was of a musical...
I mean, although I didn't know it at the time, my father was musical. I didn't really get together with him until I was, 19, 20. He left when we were kids, my sister and I.
Right.
Well, I was a toddler. She was a baby. So it was my stepfather, really, that introduced me to a lot of music. He came along mid-60s. He had a record player, which we didn't have at the time. My mum was a single parent.
Yes.
And one of the first records that I remember him showing me the cover of, and I really fell in love with, was Django Reinhardt. It's called The Art of Django. It's got Django Reinhardt's head on an artist palette.
Yes.
It was, that was a bit of a revelation to me. And another one he had, which was on, I think, Ace of Clubs Records, Django Reinhardt and the Hot Club de France. But amongst the other things, I mean, there was the pop music. The first single I ever fell in love with was Might As Well Rain Until September by Carole King, which my nan used to have the radio on in the kitchen because we lived with her when we first moved, when my father first left. And she had the radio on, which my mother never did. You know, she never listened to pop radio.
Yes.
After that, it was my stepfather. He was into all sorts of things, a little bit of jazz, blues. In fact, I looked up Jesse Fuller the other day because I remembered Leadbelly, but Jesse Fuller played this song called The Monkey and the Engineer, which I think when I Googled it, it came up Grateful Dead as well, so I don't know if they did a version.
Well, he might have done.
Also, I mean, he liked sea shanties, all sorts of folk, the Carter Family, the Dubliners. We went to see the Dubliners at the Albert Hall, way up in the gods, you know.
Yes. My God, that's amazing.
So, and all sorts of influences there. Oh, bluegrass as well. I love bluegrass because I love strings.
Yes.
Anything with strings, you know.
Was all good. So did you stay in Dublin, or when did you move out of Dublin?
We went in 69, came back, I think, 72.
Right. Back to
So
Dublin.
yeah,
Yes.
my early teenage was spent in Dublin.
God, that's amazing. Did you?
It
Because I
was
did it.
a very interesting city at the time because it was a small city. It was like a small version of London, maybe 10 years beforehand.
Yes.
Great atmosphere.
Nice. That must have been incredible. And when did a musical instrument appear in your life at this stage?
It didn't appear at that stage. I mean, I did actually try playing my stepfather's guitar, which was nylon strung, and I didn't get on with it very well. I could only really play the top two strings, which actually has become part of my style. But I did have a love of strings, so I went for guitar lessons at school. Borrowed the money from my mother, bought a classical guitar. I think I did 2 lessons and hated it. I didn't like the guitar, I didn't like the strings, I didn't like the smell of it, and I hated the lessons. One string doing blowing in the wind,
Yes.
So I sold the guitar, paid my mother back, and thought, well, that's it then. I'm not really a guitar player.
No.
Then I was 16, maybe 15 when this happened, but I went to stay with my grandmother. It would be 15 maybe, because my grandfather died when I was 16. He was still around. She asked me if there was anything she could do to entertain me because I was staying with her for a little bit. And I asked about music, and she said, well, actually, my son left his guitar in the loft. So she got it down for me, and it turned out to be a Hofner President.
Blimey.
It's an arch top jazz guitar,
Yes.
And I fell in love with it on site. I couldn't really play it because it had massively heavy bronze strings on it, but I loved it anyway, and she let me take it home with me, and that started me. I put lighter strings on it. The neck was bent, and you could never do anything with it because it had no truss rod. But yeah, I fell in love with it, and that really started me off. I mean, without that, I probably never would have played.
No. Was your mum slightly surprised when you brought home this guitar? Was that her?
It was, yeah.
Was that her brother? Was that her brother? Because she said
no, it's the other side. My father's, my father's brother. He moved to Australia.
God, that must have been
this guitar behind.
Yeah, well, yes, you can't take everything with you. And was your sister, was she older or younger than you?
Younger.
Right, so you were the eldest of the family.
Yeah.
Yes. So when you got 74, you were 16. I know I'm doing the maths here. Did you leave school at this stage, or did you stay on for A-levels?
I stayed on for A-levels, yeah.
Right. What was your subjects that you were particularly fond of?
I was particularly fond of English and geography, and art, but I think the art had a problem with the teaching. We didn't really seem to know what we should have known, and so we all did fairly badly in that.
Yes.
The English and geography seemed to be marked very hard in those days. I had, and not an unintelligent English set I was part of, and I was the only one who passed, and I only got an O level.
Right.
That was the art. I got like a D or an E or something, and I was the only one who passed. And like 2 of the girls were from Berkhamsted Girls' School. That's where they'd been educated up until 6th form. So, they weren't dumb.
No.
They were very, very harsh in those days.
Were you doing the 11 plus at that stage? Had you done that?
I luckily, because of my dodgy maths, I actually missed the 11 plus by a year, I think it was.
Right.
So I actually got into what had been a grammar school, but had become a comprehensive.
Yes, that great changeover. It's quite strange, isn't it? Because anybody I remember who managed to get an A or a B, which was amazing, an A, they would be like Einstein in my day, my God. And now you get kids who've got five A stars. And
I think the whole system has changed a lot since those days.
But getting a pass was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. But an A was just unheard of, And even going to A levels. So did you do A levels and then university at some stage?
I did A levels, and then I didn't want to go to university. I went to art college doing a foundation course, which is where I grew up a bit, and I met people that eventually got me into the punk scene.
Yes.
Actually, John Maybury, who became a film director later.
Who was that?
John Maybury.
John Maybury.
He introduced me to the Banshees because he knew they needed a guitarist. So we went to see them at the Music Machine.
Right.
I could see that there was a bit of a mismatch with the guitarist and the rest of the band.
Yes. Did you, I mean, because you'd obviously were at the perfect age of seeing sort of the glam period, and obviously your love of Deep Purple and Ritchie Blackmore as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I like that single.
Yes.
I actually bought Fireball just out of nostalgia, but yeah, that was about it really for Deep Purple. Once I got wind of T-Rex and particularly Bowie. Bowie kind of blew T-Rex out of the water as well.
Yes. Well, that's because it's interesting you mentioned Fireball, because that's one of my favourite songs that they did, because it just had that whoosh at the start, didn't it? Which was incredibly exciting and dramatic. And I was just going to say, because I did an interview with a guy who produced that song called Mike Thorne, who was a very young engineer at the time, and he'd been left with this job of doing it. And there was some sort of air conditioning system that had a sound, and he recorded it, and they put it at the start of that song. And I was very excited when he told me that, because being about 12 and sneaking into my brother's room to play his records, Deep Purple being one, I just used to find, Fireball was just like, wow, that is just rocket, that is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he explained it was kind of some air conditioning system that he'd recorded as a young chap, and there you go. I thought, my God, you were the man who produced that sound. So, and you went from the Marc. Sorry, that was a really exciting story there. But not many people know Fireball and Burn. There was another song that they did, which I thought was great, but then I got bored of them. So Bowie came on your radar quite soon after Boland.
Yeah, Starman really.
Were you old enough to be there watching Top of the Pops when he did The Moment?
I was, yes, yeah.
And did it have a profound effect?
My stepfather wasn't around, because if Top of the Pops was on, he'd quite often walk into the room and say, "I don't want this rubbish," and turn it off.
Yes.
Yeah, luckily I did get to see that.
That was the moment. And what was your first gig you ever went to?
Oh, well, apart from the Dubliners.
The Dubliners.
I don't know. I wasn't that keen on live music.
Right.
I liked records more than I liked live music. But back in Hemel, which is where I spent a lot of my childhood and teenage, we had the Pavilion, which has since been knocked down. So you had all sorts of people coming through there. So I kind of went to everything, but I can't remember now what my first gig would have been.
No.
I really can't.
God, the Dubliners at the Royal Albert Hall then could have been anything. You didn't get that kind of teenage excitement of that, the moment the lights came down and the band strolled on stage, kind of think, God, I love it.
I mean, I'm a bit better these days, but I wasn't very sociable. So
right.
I didn't have a huge gang of friends, A lot of the people that I was at school with would go to like Alice Cooper and various people, even Genesis, but I didn't like that stuff.
No.
They went to more or less everything. I had a very strict mother who, she was a teacher, and like going out on school days was verboten, you just didn't do it.
No.
So I didn't go to a lot of live gigs until much later.
Yes. And you were at perfect age of sort of feeling like, well, like Dr. Feelgood, Doctors of Madness, the early punk moments, and then obviously that rise of suddenly quite a different group of people on Top of the Pops with the Clash and the Sex Pistols. Was that exciting, or did you sort of not look at it as that brilliant?
I saw a couple of the sort of pub rock groups, Kilburn and High Roads and people like that, and it was okay because it was entertaining, and it was a bit more back to basics. Some of the gigs I'd seen before were really getting above themselves. You know, it was boring. It was like drum solo, guitar solo, bass solo. You know, it went on and on and on. So yeah, things like Dr. Feelgood, who did come to him,
Yes.
were a breath of fresh air. And the punk scene I got into gradually. A friend of ours, Pete Stanfield, he was doing an apprenticeship at the time. He would get tickets. He had very strange taste, so I ended up seeing bands like Screwdriver, which I wouldn't have chosen to go and see. But yeah, we saw a sort of a wide variety of people.
Yes.
And I started to get a whiff of what was going on. Plus, the singles were starting to come out: Spiral Scratch and The Damned, New Rose, things like that, which were exciting.
Yes.
And a different level of energy.
I could imagine. Did you start listening to John Peel and sort of picking up on that scene at all?
Yeah.
Was he quite important at this stage?
Not terrifically, but yeah, he was. I'd always listened to radio since I was like early teens.
So did you have any bands when you were, in your sixth form period or around that school period? Had you been in bands before?
I was actually playing a Bowie song to myself because we had a music teacher that encouraged us to bring in instruments.
Yes.
So I brought my guitar in. I was actually practicing in a stationery cupboard in the art block, and my friends were standing outside the door, unbeknownst to me, and heard me playing and singing, and they knew I played, but they didn't know what. And afterwards, they said, "Look, our singer has left. We could really do with someone to replace him. We know it's not the sort of music you like, but will you just give it a go?" So I did. It wasn't really my sort of music, but I really enjoyed being in the group.
Yes.
Mainly, we did a few live gigs, but it was mostly just rehearsing. So that gave me a little bit of training, really, of what a rehearsal was, a little bit of playing live. So when the opportunity came to join the Banshees, without that, I probably would have thought, I can't do that.
Yes.
But
were you somebody who was quite studious, practicing and being sort of experimental, or just being a bit obsessive about practice?
I mean, when you're a teenager and, you haven't got to think about where your next meal's coming from, you can afford to spend the time.
Yes.
As I said, I did love the guitar, both that guitar and when I joined this group, they'd found this guitar in a local guitar shop, Tyne Music, and it was like an electric version of what I was already playing. So it's a Hagstrom semi-acoustic with F-holes, and I loved it as much as the Hofner. So, yeah, I've lost track now.
Yes, just no, just those kind of the early. I was talking about the practicing and developing a style, and sort of. I just also curious.
That's quite difficult. I mean, because I knew I never sat down and listened to records and tried to play them. I didn't learn that way. Most guitarists do. The only one I've heard of recently, because I looked him up on Wikipedia for the first time ever, although I've loved his music for a long time, was Tom Verlaine.
Okay.
He didn't do that either. I knew we had something in common.
So it was just literally... did you enjoy sort of working out chords or working out,
Yeah, rhythms? I mean, I intended to write songs from very early on. My first love was words, so I used to write poetry anyway.
Right.
So lyrics was the next step. Not that anyone was necessarily going to ever see them, but I liked lyrics, and I just started constructing songs just for my own pleasure,
Because you mentioned earlier Carole King, who was the favourite with Tapestry, and then I love people like Joni Mitchell and a bit of Van Morrison, and then Burt Bacharach. I mean, I love that kind of romantic melancholia. Did you have either poets or songwriters that you were drawn to at that stage?
Well, it's funny. Joni Mitchell, actually, I knew, bits like Big Yellow Taxi and stuff, but I wasn't a big Joni Mitchell fan until Hejira.
Right.
That came out just at the right time for me. And I guess it was 76. The first two chords on Mirage are a real tribute to Hejira.
Okay.
Because I'd never thought of moving a chord up several frets before. And I'm not even sure that's what she did, because she used open tunings and things. But it was the sounds that I loved on that album. And so I just, commandeered that from Mirage, which people that have interviewed me before are quite astounded that the first two chords in Mirage are to do with Hejira, but they are.
Nice, because I really love, there's Fury Sings the Blues and also Black Crow, which I really love those songs on that particular album. I just think
it's a fantastic album.
It is got everything and more. And then the Summer of Hissing Lawns and Court and Spark, I know they are a bit more obvious, but Hejira's got, she has a very nice sonic sound with her guitar. And as you mentioned, open tunings that we loved so much. And also, she had quite a jazz kind of background as well. That she went from sort of a bit folk, but then she also had a love of jazz because she did that album with Mingus, didn't she, as well?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing also. The guy who had this group was one of my couple of friends at school. He was into soul music and a bit of jazz, and he taught me some of the chords that I still use, diminished and suspendeds and things that I still use. A friend of mine came to see the Banshees in Leeds, and he wasn't a friend at the time, but he has been for the last 30-odd years. He said he was standing there looking at me playing, and he's a guitar player as well. He said to himself, he's using disco chords. He was right. I mean, I had a great love of soul as well, Al Green, and my friend introduced me to Sly and the Family Stone, Betty Wright, just there's a whole different universe of sounds. They seem to be very experimental with production and effects and things. You didn't get that so much with regular sort of rock and roll.
No. Well, Sly and the Family Stone, there's the album, is it A Riot Going On with a Family Affair, which has kind of got a gorgeous feeling to it as well. So, and I guess there's that sort of, the funk as well, wasn't there? And I know when I saw George Clinton, and there was that kind of sort of element of psychedelic guitar that they used as well, which was quite nice. So, and I love Al Green. There's a couple of albums he's done, Call Me being one, and I think Take Me to the River or something like that. So,
and Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
The master of songwriting, unbelievable.
Absolutely stunning. Actually, that was a very rich time, because those albums that were coming out during that period, they were all pretty incredible, really.
We were spoiled for choice, across the genres. We were spoiled for choice.
Yes, absolutely. And I probably caught up with these things. So, did you ever sort of enjoy the work of Steve Howe, though? Did anything from that kind of?
No, prog rock really didn't get me at all. I don't know if I've got the patience or what, but I just didn't like it. As I said, that sort of self-indulgent guitar solo, drum solo, bass solo, it bored me.
Yes.
I think it bored a generation, which is why we all turned to punk.
And what was it like being asked to join a band that was kind of slightly established. Was that quite an interesting challenge? Because you said you were shy. Did you feel a little bit like, God, this is a bit of a weird one?
Yeah, I did. I said to John, really? Can I just walk into that? And he tried to convince me that I would be able to. He'd heard tapes of me playing, so he knew I could. But I'd never played anything like that, really. I had to sit down and learn their set and then go to rehearsal and play it. And, I mean, it wasn't difficult. It was bar chords, but it was outside my experience.
Yes.
But it worked out, one rehearsal and I was in.
You were in. Had you come across people like Marco Peroni at that stage, or had you ever met him? No, because I think he was kind of around that scene, wasn't he?
Yeah. No, I hadn't met anyone at that point.
No, there you go. And what was it like sort of putting your personality onto a band? Did you feel, was it quite an interesting dynamic? Sort of, because I often wonder how David Bowie used to get on sort of constructing these new bands for these projects and albums, and thinking it must have been weird dealing with, all these different people walking into the space and then, sitting there and rehearsing.
I mean, as I said, songwriting was what I wanted to do anyway. So it wasn't a stretch for me to write songs. I'd already written them. And I was kind of in the same area as they were anyway, with influences. So it just wasn't difficult. I mean, I started bringing songs to them fairly early on, after a little while of just playing live and getting into it. And Siouxsie would go through her exercise book looking for lyrics, and it just clicked. There wasn't really a problem.
Yes. And was your first time in the studio, was that the John Peel session?
Yeah.
Who was your producer? Was it the famous Dale Griffin at that point from Mott the Hoople?
I think it might have been Malcolm, somebody.
Right.
I don't remember, to be honest.
Had you, with that set, because with this one, was this the one that you recorded? Was it Hong Kong Garden, Helter Skelter, Overground and Carcass?
I really can't remember offhand what the order of play was on those sessions.
Yes.
I haven't actually looked at them or listened to them for years.
Yes, just details. I know, it's kind of strange, isn't it? Because all this is obviously very exciting stuff for us dear listeners, isn't it, really, at this age? So, but then you went into the studio to do the first album.
We did Hong Kong Garden first, the single, which didn't go very well. We went to Olympic Studios, which I actually walked past the other day, and it's now been turned into a cinema, which is a shame. We were put in with Bruce Albertine. I don't know whose idea that was. He was from Muscle Shoals.
Right.
Not a great match with the Banshees. It was on Eric Clapton's downtime, and so all his stuff was grouped into the middle of the huge studio in Olympic. The huge studio seemed to suit the sound of Voices, which we did for the B-side. And it was a pretty strange song anyway, so we got away with that, but Hong Kong Garden just didn't sound right. Wrong producer, wrong studio. So it was time for a rethink. Niels had to go out and find somebody, and Steve Lidioite was working with Johnny Thunders,
right,
who was a friend of Niels anyway, and there was a kind of, if he can work with Johnny, he can work with anyone. So we went down to the same studios, in Ireland Studios, and worked with Steve, and it really was clicked again, just naturally. He was young, very enthusiastic, very good at his job. So, that wasn't a problem. We had then an A-side and a B-side, and so when it came to the album, Steve Lidioite was the obvious choice.
Blimey, that was quite a fortuitous moment, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It must have been quite a relief. And did you then sort of have all the material rehearsed and demoed for the first album?
I don't know if we demoed it or, but we'd certainly played them live. Yeah.
Because yes, that's quite a strong set, isn't it? So because obviously it's quite an organic process. So Siouxsie mostly had the lyrics, you mostly had the music, and then you did the cover
Well,
version.
Steve had lyrics as well.
Right.
So she had the book. I guess she wrote some of Steve's down as well. Also, Steve came up with ideas for music, but he wasn't a songwriter as such at that point. He did come up with ideas like Jigsaw is part me, part him.
Yes.
What was the other one? Nicotine is very much Steve. So, there was collaboration, but I was the main songwriter.
My God, you were. You've done the music on all the B side, or side too, haven't you, really? That was quite an impressive kind of, so there must have been a rich kind of moment of creativity between the band. Did that feel like quite a honeymoon period at that stage?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I wasn't expecting it. I mean, at that age, you used to kind of go with the flow,
Yes.
And I wasn't surprised in a way. I just felt I was in the right place. And obviously they did too.
I would imagine.
Just kind of went with it.
Did you sort of enjoy the kind of spontaneous, not spontaneous, but the kind of exciting, fan base that suddenly appeared around the band as well?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the audience was very enthusiastic. They did spit a lot, which wasn't pleasant.
God, that must have been hideous. Did you ever come to the West Runton Pavilion on the Norfolk coast? Did you do a lot of touring at that stage?
We did a lot of touring, but I don't remember going to Norfolk. No, I've been there in my life since, but I don't remember going there then.
Yes. And what was it like then, sort of having sort of digested the success of the first album and then the kind of exciting second album moment?
By that time, there was a little bit of friction going on. I think Niels was obviously a little bit out of his depth, and he wasn't handling things very well, the sort of nuts and bolts of it. There'd been a little bit of a tussle over the staircase, which he brought in Mike Stavro to produce, although I think Niels was the co-producer on that. Then he started bringing himself in as co-producer as well, which, considering his lack of experience, I'm not sure how that worked. Mike Stavro turned out to be a little bit sarcastic, nothing like Lily White. I mean, technically very good, but just not very pleasant to work with. I've got a cat here meowing his head off.
Well, yes, don't worry. I'm obviously a cat lover by the picture that I had there. What are your cats called, by the way? Cat?
That one's called Jet. He's the eldest, and he's gone a little bit crazy in recent years. Then Merlin and Siren.
Nice, got 3. There you go. Happy.
My wife is a definite cat lover.
Well,
unfortunately,
yes.
I'm allergic to them, so I have to have steroids to keep me healthy.
Well, that's quite a dedication to the cause. Yeah. So Niels, so how did you not sort of just say, look, this guy's not working for us. We need to.
Oh, we did. Kenny and I did, but Siouxsie and Steve didn't, and there became that sort of 3 against 2 dynamic. Wasn't helpful. So
what was his relationship with the band?
Well, basically, they wouldn't have got anywhere without him. He was absolutely besotted with Siouxsie, and he saw something in them right from the beginning. So, he helped them right through all their early problems of getting the band together and gigs and everything. So I could understand that they trusted him, but unfortunately, I think their trust held on for too long. And,
yes. So he wasn't the manager?
He was the manager.
He was the manager. Yes, I should have remembered that. Yes. So he was my God, the dynamics had already begun, hadn't they? It's never easy. No. Yes. It's a tricky one. So so you felt like a bit of a spare the outside on this.
Yeah. Also, by that time, once we were recording, we'd agreed to split the royalties 4 ways. So even though I'm writing a lot of the music, I'm only getting a quarter.
Yes.
And that's after the record company has taken its whack, and the producer and the manager, and so that split did cause problems from then on. I can't think where else. Over artwork to some extent. Staircase, we had a bit of a tussle over artwork.
Yes.
It went on.
God, it doesn't sound like it was ever a nice time.
It was a great time for the first however long before the first album. It was brilliant. Hong Kong Garden, it wasn't our problem that we had the wrong producer, so that wasn't a problem.
Yes.
Dream was great with Lily White. It's only after that, really, that things started to fall apart a little bit. I mean, only a small amount to start with, but the division was there from then on, with Neil, Siouxsie and Steve kind of outvoting Kenny and I on everything.
Blimey, it's horrible, isn't it? So when you went to do the second album, was there much kind of excitement about it, or was it already feeling like this isn't working out?
It was a bit of both. I mean, we were excited to record the songs. There were some good songs. There weren't enough good songs. We should have been producing more. I had them in my head. I could have easily done what we always did before and brought songs to the rehearsal, and Sue would sort out a lyric, but we were starting not to get on well enough for that to happen as naturally as it had.
Yes.
There was no reason for it apart from this sort of unhappiness in the band, we artistically we could easily have done it.
God, that's so annoying, isn't it? That is so.
Yeah.
So then, what happens to? What's the moment where you decide to leave the band?
Well, as I say, that sort of dynamic was set up, and it made it more and more difficult to function. Kenny and I were kind of started to be treated as nuisances. Really, the time it really settled it was really when the gear for the first real gig of the tour to support Joined Hands was Belfast. We'd done a couple of warm-ups, but that was really the first one with the full stage set, all the proper lighting, everything thrown in, and the gear got held up on the other side of the Irish Sea. We were in Belfast, it was in wherever, Holyhead. So we had none of our instruments, none of the lighting, nothing. And instead of cancelling it, it went ahead. That was another Neil's decision that really backfired, because by the end of that horribly embarrassing situation, we were in a horrible state as a band. Our morale couldn't have been any lower, I don't think.
No.
And when you walk onto a stage with other people's instruments, we had to borrow the Cure's instruments. They weren't very happy about it. No proper lighting. The audience standing there looking like astounded that we're walking in like we were walking onto the stage of the Vortex or something, really like primitive. They just looked annoyed, and I couldn't blame them.
Yes. God,
so, yeah, by the end of that, I don't think we were in a situation that was going to be have a happy ending.
My God, I think that's the only time I've heard. Actually, Morrissey had a moment. I think some of the it was him walking away from a gig, and the band were just hanging around, waiting to go on stage, and someone said, "Oh, by the way, your singer's gone to Japan or something." It's like,
right.
That's a bit. So in this case, it's quite different, isn't it? Because you're the one.
We ended up we got to the gig. We got to Aberdeen. And we were supposed to be doing this record shop promotion for which we weren't supplied the records. The records hadn't turned up. Neil's at the last minute got some records from Polydor, which Kenny and I weren't told, I don't think. We didn't realise were promotional records. So one of the things that irritated everybody was us giving away promotional records which had not for resale stamped on them. They were going to sell them, I think. And then after the album had been played a few times, Kenny and I had noticed that they had the Slits' new album and Talking Heads' new album. So we suggested playing a track or two, not the whole album, but just a track or two, just out of interest.
Yes.
We weren't supposed to be like a normal band that functioned like, a pop band on the road to success. So we didn't see a problem with it, but Siouxsie and Steve did. And Siouxsie in particular got very irate and rushed me behind the counter in the record shop and smashed into my back. And that was it, really. Finito.
God.
We were in a bad state anyway, but that was just the final straw.
That was it. That was, you did your Ziggy Stardust, didn't you? But in a slightly different way. God, you had to leave. Did you feel a bit like you're on the run at this stage? Because actually, I've never come across a situation like this with all these interviews I've done. This is quite a different scenario, actually.
Yeah, we weren't. I mean, no, we weren't on the run to start with. We walked out of the record shop. Kenny smashed his beer into the pavement in annoyance. We walked down to a coffee shop that was only like a few doors down. I mean, if somebody had come after us, they would have found us in the coffee shop, but no one did. So we sat there, had a coffee, both in a bit of a state, and we kind of looked at one another and said, that's kind of it, isn't it? We didn't feel like there was any going back from that.
Yes.
Somebody outside that triumvirate of Neil, Siouxsie and Steve could probably have talked us around, but the man with the head on his shoulders, quite sensible, was in the hotel having a bath at the time, Dave Woods, who knew nothing about any of this going on. If he'd actually sat down with us, he may have been able to calm us down, but as I say, he wasn't around.
Right.
The first he knew, the poor sod, was when he found out we'd gone. So, yeah, we went back to the hotel, we packed, and I mean, I kind of expected somebody to be like there at some point,
Yes.
having a word with us, but no one turned up. Not until we were out in the taxi, and we had to get out to the taxi by going down the back stairs because Margaret Thatcher had moved into the hotel and her Secret Service were all over the hotel.
Blimey.
So we kind of crept down the back stairs to get to the cab. And then Neil's turned up with one of the security and kind of said, where are you going? And we said, home or off or whatever,
Yes.
And he was just kind of annoyed. He didn't try and talk us down. And then he asked the guy, the bouncer, security, whatever you like to call him, bodyguard, to intervene. And he's gone suddenly from being the person who's protecting us to being the person who's being told to get them out of the cab bodily, drag them out.
Blimey.
And he just stood there like shifting from one foot to the other, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, the cab driver, as a Glaswegian, sees this situation going on, just puts his foot down. And Niels is halfway through the windows, getting like pulled along a little bit, and then he lets go and we went off.
Escape. My God, that sounds like one of those moments that Hawkwind once had in Paris, I think, when they drove off trying to, yes. They wanted to sack one of the members of the band, but they were scared of him, so they all jumped on the bus and went down. But then they got to a traffic light and he came running down the road, slightly naked, I think, saying, banging on the door. So it's a slightly similar but slightly different. Does that mean when a moment like that happens, do you get your musical equipment back, or do you get any?
No, I got nothing back. In fact, I took this is to show you the kind of mood I was in when I went on tour. I took that Hofner President, which I'd had since I was 15, with me on tour to write songs, to continue writing.
Yes.
That's the vision I had of being on the tour. And that guitar was left behind. All the rest of my guitars were, including the Hagstrom, was in the warehouse. But I had 2 Les Pauls. They were with them. Everything I had was with them and stayed with them. I never got it back. I got the Hagstrom back because I went to the Texonic warehouse with a friend of mine who knew where it was, because they got gear there as well. And I walked in and got my Hagstrom back. I didn't take anything that didn't belong to me. I just got my Hagstrom back.
You said that's, yes, they can't get me on that one.
No.
So what's the kind of, I mean, as with age, we sort of have to deal with lots of admin. Is there any kind of, anything that happens when you leave a band like that? Or when a band, I mean, sometimes when a band finishes, but this is different when you've got your songwriting on credits and stuff. Is there any sort of paperwork or legalities that have to happen?
Well, yeah, it went into a legal tussle that lasted 10 years. The record royalties weren't so much of a problem. They did take a little while to come through, but they did start to come through. Publishing was another matter. That was blocked for 10 years.
Right.
It only came to us in the end because, firstly, Siouxsie and Budgie turned up when my wife and I were getting married. Just by coincidence, we went to a hotel in the Lake District and then went to Gretna Green to get married. When we walked into the hotel in the Lake District, there was Siouxsie and Budgie in the dining room. So there was a bit of a conflab about publishing, which Siouxsie was still reluctant to talk about, but Budgie was saying, you really should give them their publishing, you know. So there was that, ice was broken, but then when they went to see their solicitor about it, I think they were probably still going to fight it. Because they were trying to claim back the money they said they'd lost by the tour being stopped.
Right.
That wasn't all our fault, you know, but that would have been argued in court.
Yes.
But actually, they found that it had run out of time because the case had actually been started. And so it had run for over 6 years, which meant they didn't have a case anymore. They couldn't prosecute us on that basis because they hadn't done anything about it. It had run out of time. So they had to come to an agreement.
And the publishing
Yeah, it was unpleasant, you know, talking to lawyers and trying to prepare a case. We went through 3 lawyers in the end, trying to prepare a case.
Yes. God, it's a funny and murky world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know Hunter S. Thompson's got a very good quote about rock and roll, which I won't be able to remember, but it's worth checking. So this is 79. Obviously, you mentioned the great Margaret Thatcher-ish, you know, not great, but, you know, she gets into power, you know, and then the 80s appear. What does your next kind of musical, you know, journey take you from that couple of years?
I had songs in my head which would have been Banshee songs if I had an opportunity to present them. So Polydor gave us some time in studio because they were kind of duty bound. Plus, they would, if they thought I was going to give them a top 10 hit again, they probably would have stuck with us.
Yes.
Yeah, what I recorded was a bit too extreme for them or not commercial enough, so they were quite happy to lose us, having done their bit, you know. So I did that demo, and I did another one as well, which I can't remember who it was for. So that started the process of going through the 80s, going around record companies, doing demos, which is where this album comes from.
Yes, this is the album Sixes and Sevens,
yeah,
which is coming out on Tiny Global, which is very exciting. So I've had a listen to it today because thankfully John gave me because before that I just heard Flair, but you've got a whole. Yeah. So these 11 tracks, Zen and the Art of Nonsense, going through to Type, Tightrope. Are these all tracks that were just recorded in different periods in the 80s with different lineups?
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
Flair was one of the first.
Flair, did you say Flair was?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So did you have a band at this stage? Did you sort of bring together a musical kind of
I didn't
combo?
have a band at first. I had Kenny help me out on the first recordings, but then he didn't want to be a drummer anymore. Basically, that's part of the reason he left.
Right.
He was complaining about it wrecking his fingers, and he was an artist, and he wanted to get back to that. I wanted to carry on playing guitar, but so he helped me out, but he didn't want to stay around. I got Mick Allen from Rima Rima on bass, and a friend of my wife's then later, Marc Sugden, actually played on a couple of tracks. But then from then on, it was searching for musicians. I was very lucky with the drummer. I walked into a gig in Heaven. It was an eco gig. And
yes.
I said to Linda, my wife, that is my drummer.
Was that Graham?
Yeah, Graham Dowdall, brilliant drummer.
Right. And was that, so did he record Tightrope, Amber and Vigilante? Yeah. Were they the 3 tracks that he'd recorded with you?
Yeah. But he stayed with us right through from whenever it was we were first together, early 80s, probably 82 or something, right through to 89 when I just hit the nail on the head, put the nail in the coffin. I'd had enough by then of going around record companies and not getting any joy out of anyone.
Yes, God, it's kind of difficult, that period, and because actually the album's very diverse, isn't it? It's quite a lot of different. Because there was one track, is it Sacred Measure, which is quite, because that's the one which is. I've got some notes here actually. Yes, it's quite an instrumental start to it, isn't it? Can you remember how that song comes about?
Yeah. There's a pamphlet put out in the 60s called In Defense of the Sacred Measure. When the metric system was being mooted as the next step, there were some people of that vintage, the 60s, who thought it was a very bad move. And they put this pamphlet out about measurements being associated with the human body, the way the inch was the last joint of the thumb.
Yes.
Just much more linked to the way we are and the way the cathedrals were built. And so this got us thinking, Linda and I, about writing a song. And so we wrote it, called it Sacred Measure, but then we were putting a 12-inch out like Tightrope, and with Tightrope we use strings.
Yes.
But that actually came out of the way I was playing the guitar. But this time I came up with something that was like a Bach fugue, although I couldn't manage a fugue. So I did the melody, the notes, but then we got Andy Diagram to... I'm going to have to close the door because the cat's in...
Yes, the cat's very excitable at the moment, isn't it? Yeah. It definitely wants to collaborate on the next album.
Yeah, so Graham knew Andy Diagram, great trumpet player, great musician all around.
Right.
He came down from Manchester, stayed with Graham, and we recorded at Firehouse, which was a great little studio. And he turned what were my notes into a fugue around, so because I wanted it to have that sort of cathedral music type of feel to it,
Yes.
Linda and I were very fond of going around churches and cathedrals because they're just such incredibly historic places and very interesting buildings.
Yes, because the song changes quite a lot, doesn't it? kind of the first couple of minutes or the first minute and a bit is quite an instrumental, and then it gets into quite a different. So you were quite. You were getting quite kind of not ambitious, but sort of slightly sort of adventurous on your musical kind of journey on this one.
Yeah.
Yes. So I just wondered, did you work on that for quite a bit of time?
I mean, I came up with when I had the idea, I came up with the little instrumental quite quickly. But then I knew I wanted to turn it into a fugue, but as I say, my abilities aren't such that I was going to be able to do it very easily. So I asked Andy when he turned up, I played it for him on guitar, and he said that it wouldn't be a problem doing that.
Nice.
He's a proper musician.
Who was doing the vocals as well at this stage?
Me and Linda.
Right, there you go.
We sang in unison, you know.
Okay, right, I got you. And there was another track, Taken for Granted. See, that one reminded me a bit of Rima Rima.
Oh, really?
I think so. Taken for Granted. It's not.
That's Mick Allen on bass, you know, who was in Rima Rima. That's him playing the bass.
Right, I don't know. It just had a particular style to it. What was the inspiration for that particular number?
I mean, I had that. That's the beginning of that song for a while. The inspiration for that was how I felt I was treated in the Banshees.
Right.
Latterly. Not to start with, but definitely latterly.
Yes. Well, there you go. And I remember we were very excited. Well, my brother's generation was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance book.
Yeah.
What was the Zen and the Art of Nonsense? How did that particular book?
It was a play on words, really, because I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. But this is it's about human folly, really. So hence nonsense.
Were you at all influenced by Syd Barrett during your sort of younger days, or did you come? Because there was kind of times when I sort of thought of Syd Barrett, listened to the album. That's all.
Yeah, he's definitely figured in my mind since probably, I can't remember when I first heard it, because I wasn't a Pink Floyd fan at all. I didn't like. Somebody played me Dark Side of the Moon and said, "No, you've got to like this." I said, "No, I don't like it." I just wasn't impressed, and nothing about it impressed me. And I didn't like any of modern Pink Floyd, I'm afraid. Sorry, boys. I'm sure, sure they're devastated.
No.
But early Pink Floyd, once I heard Syd Barrett and I heard the first two Pink Floyd albums, they blew me away.
Right.
Because he had the same sort of approach that, you know, just doing what you do, never mind what's been done before or whatever. And he wasn't very blues based, and neither was my playing.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember there was an interview with one of Pink Floyd who said that when he came to the studio and no one really recognised him, and he sat in on the recording of one of their albums, and somebody asked him what he thought of it, and he said it just sounds old. And that's kind of, you know, that said it all, really. He was going somewhere. He didn't know exactly where, but he was going somewhere with it. And that's how I've continued as well. If it starts to sound like somebody else, I really don't continue with it.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that story, because I've heard that, you know, they've talked about it, because it was the strange, this man appeared, which is weird, because I think they were doing Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is a song. And I think and I couldn't believe a complete stranger could sort of walk into the studio and be sitting there and then thinking, who is it? And it's like, I think it's Sid. But the timing with that song, which was written about him as well. So it seemed a bit of a...
Actually. That's
Pardon?
One of the few Pink Floyd songs I actually like. Love the later, lineup.
Yes, and then your second track on the album, "Fun on the Dance Floor." Where did this inspiration come from?
Fun on the Floor.
Yes,
That is basically a love song between Linda and I, written in the early 80s when we were absolutely broke. But we had a very strong relationship right from the start. And so it was, we were in a very basic mode of life, but it was fun.
Yes.
We were very close. We were starting to create together. So, yeah, it was tough. The 80s were tough.
Well, I think one of the reasons, what I've noticed, because though I was an indie kid from that decade, there were so many bands, but I think there was a huge amount of the unemployment benefit system or creative enterprise allowance schemes, all those things helped people sort of have some almost form of payment, which was very small, but enough to sort of get by. And there was also housing benefit and council tax being paid as well via the government. So it allowed people, because at the time, having a career and having ambition it just seemed pointless. So I think being unemployed didn't seem to be like you were a complete failure in life. And at the time there had been, it was quite a weird decade. You had the Falkland War, then the miners' strike, and then, Greenham Common, there was the threat of nuclear war all the time.
Yeah.
And then the rise of that yuppie generation. And the charts were full of that kind of, the Trevor Horn production, which was, Spandau Ballet and Frankie and, Duran Duran.
We actually spoke to ZTT for a year because we went there and Paul Morley loved us. We became very friendly with him. Trevor Horn's wife actually came to terms with us after a little bit. She was quite happy. Trevor Horn didn't turn up on the scene to talk to us for months and months and months. Well, I think it was nearly a year when he actually sat down with us and said the vocals were some of the worst he'd ever heard. He didn't like the music. And so that was that,
God, that was a very difficult one to cope with, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Because Paul Morley would have had our name on the list. They had an ad on TV with a list scrolling down of the people that were on ZTT, many of whom never recorded, I must say. But he wasn't having any of it.
I think there was the art and noise and propaganda at one stage, wasn't there? That was the sort of the big push. And just going back to the kind of collection of tracks on this, Vigilante, where does this sit in the sort of the 80s period and inspiration?
It's another very early one. I think that was one of the earliest tracks I recorded. Blair, Taken for Granted, First at West. Yeah, it was probably about the fourth track. So it was a strange time with like police and feeling on the street. It's very different now. You don't see a policeman hardly.
No.
So you had the special patrol group and all sorts of stuff going on. It wasn't a very happy time. So Vigilante. Well, it's what it says. It's about people taking the law into their own hands.
And were you living in London at that stage?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Tightrope, does that sort of fit? Was that an early track as well?
Tightrope I wrote probably before I left the Banshees. I wrote the lyrics sitting in a cafe. I was living in Gospel Oak, and there's a cafe on the corner at the bottom of Pond Street where the Royal Free is, the Royal Free Hospital. I used to watch people coming in the door because I used to go in there for a snack. They'd walk across the floor to the counter. I just used to watch their body language. I don't know if I actually wrote the lyrics then. I think I probably wrote the lyrics afterwards. Probably by the time I'd left, I'd started writing the lyrics. But it was actually... It started to get mixed up with Smiley as well, John le Carré.
Oh, yes.
A little bit of Spy going on there. When I actually started writing, it was a little bit later. So, body language and the way people watch one another, and so Spies came into it as well.
No.
But this cafe was an incredible place. It was very sort of plain looking, but very 50s little cafe with rounded plate glass windows. Because it was right on the corner.
Yes.
And you had like emigres playing chess sometimes inside on the seats by the window and sometimes outside. It had great atmosphere, and unfortunately they ripped the whole thing out and turned it into a nasty double glazed pizza place.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a great place, and yeah, well, I got a song out of it. That's how good it was.
And during that time, were you sort of taking in the sort of culture of that decade, not only music but film wise? There was kind of films by people like Jim Jarmusch, who did Down by Law and Stranger Than Paradise, and then there was Betty Blue, and there was kind of a lot of kind of exciting, art movement, as well as kind of some interesting musical moments as well that happened during the 80s. Were you plugged into that scene at all?
Not so much. I'm trying to think what films we used to go and see. I've never been a huge film fan, but yeah, we did see films. I can't remember which ones offhand. Um,
And were there any other guitar players that you were listening to at that during that decade that might not have even been from the 80s, but other decades as well?
I actually had a kind of ground zero moment where I chucked a load of records out. I think that was before I left. It was when I was still living there in Gospel Oak, where I'd got a load of records partly because I was going to like secondhand record shops, partly because the press office in Polydor had records in a cabinet that we thought were like ours to have, but apparently not because they started locking the cupboards. But I got a lot of stuff, and then I started looking at it thinking, this is just polluting my mind with unnecessary, like King Crimson and things, Yeah, Fripp's a great guitar player, but I do not like King Crimson. What am I doing with the record? So, yeah, I actually stood and chucked albums over my shoulders while a couple of my friends scrabbled across the floor, picking them all up, and they went home with a couple of armsfuls of records. And I stuffed the rest in a dustbin.
Yes, well, it was good to have a cleansing point.
Well,
Wasn't it?
yeah.
That's what I was. And with the album, just another track, Zor Gabor.
Yeah.
Where was that inspiration from?
That was kind of Falklands. It was the archetypal hero that we were being preached to about, really. And they were trying to justify what they were doing in the Falklands.
Yes.
I can't think of a bloody line now offhand. Every mother sighs, just like sending their boys off to war to be killed, basically. Yeah, it was a protest song, quite a gentle protest song, but a protest song nevertheless. And the fact it was the name of the band was just pure chance. It didn't really mean much. It just Zor Gabor became the name of the hero,
Right.
archetypal hero. Which a friend of mine was thinking about managing us, but he couldn't get his head around that at all.
Was that to say that, because you've got the other track, The Blessed West?
Blessed West, yeah.
Yes. Was that also a slightly political?
Yeah, it was, yeah. And Looks Can Kill as well is about Thatcherite. When she stood and sort of stared out into the audience when she was addressing a Conservative rally, Looks Can Kill came directly from her staring out manically. Frightening.
She rocked during that 80s, didn't she? She was non-stop really at that point. It was kind of relentless, actually. So when you got to the end of the decade and you'd got these recordings, did you have a moment where you thought that was going to be, you were going to draw a line under sort of trying to write and make music again?
I didn't consciously think that. I just I was getting more and more tired of talking to people about it and getting nowhere. So we got to the Duchess in Leeds. We did a gig there in '89.
What were you calling yourselves at this stage?
That's Zorgabor.
Right, Zorga Boy, right. Okay.
Yeah, that went right through from when we decided. We didn't drop it. We didn't call ourselves anything else. So we did the gig, and I felt like it was the warm-up gig for a tour that was never going to happen. And so every gig had been kind of a warm-up gig. You know, you never really got going any further than that, and I just had enough, really.
Yes. And that was it, the Duchess in...
Yeah.
In Leeds?
Yeah.
Right. That was it. Blimey. What, can you remember the year?
Yeah, 89.
89. That was the end of the decade. So then what? So once that happened, how do you navigate the 90s?
Well, we got married, as I say. We went to Gretna Green to get married. We finally got some publishing money, I think, the next year in 1990. I actually put a little sort of rough studio together at home, intending to write music.
Yes.
But life kind of intervened to some extent. I mean, I was disillusioned with the music business anyway. But just keeping our heads above water was continually difficult. And Linda got ill for the first time. And that was followed by her getting ill many, many times. She was an incredibly strong person, so she just fought her way back from it every time. But then just when you thought, okay, now we can start again, even though she was debilitated to some extent,
yes,
something else would hit her. So eventually she couldn't work anymore, because we used to do markets together, you know, Spitalfields and before that Camden. Vintage clothing, and
right.
making handbags and stuff. So, yeah, we just got along, you know. But by turn of the century, she'd really had it. She couldn't really do any of that stuff anymore.
Crikey.
So I became a decorator.
Well, it's yeah. So
Living.
Well, absolutely, and probably much more kind of straightforward as well. And did Linda did she sort of live a few more years?
She didn't die until 2020.
Oh, blimey!
Yeah, she pushed it until her body couldn't really take any more, basically.
So, God, she had a few Oh, God, it's well. To be honest, I sort of one of my jobs is I do work in the hospital actually as a not in a medical way, but so I'm sort of surrounded by medical things, and it's like it's quite I don't know, it slightly affects you in a different way.
When someone's ill all the time, it's kind of a full-time job as well. You spend an awful lot of time at hospitals or at the doctors. You try and negotiate the NHS system. It's it's more or less a full-time job.
Yeah, and it's just and I've had certain health moments as well. So having appointments, waiting for appointments, seeing the consultant, having operations and stuff like that. It's just one of the things with age, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So So then this decade, then, which is always very strange, and then we had lockdown. So when did the idea of bringing this album out come about?
Basically, Laurie, who I've since married, just recently, actually, in January, she heard about Linda dying a couple of months after it happened. We got together just to have a coffee and for her to give me like condolences and sympathise.
Yes.
And we thought it was going to be like a half-hour meeting, and we were talking for 2 hours. Then various lockdowns happened. We used to meet up, walk in parks, and again, just found talking really easily.
Yes.
So when things eased off a bit with COVID, a friend of hers was putting on a summer. She used to have a little sort of arts lab and she put on a summer show where she had various artists that she liked, and she'd put it on this show. So she knew my background, and she said, "Well, would you want to do it?" And I said, "Well, no, I haven't played for 30 odd years, but I'll think about it." And I'd actually started writing songs again, a couple of them about Laurie.
Yes.
So I did that show, and a few friends came along, one of whom was Vince Lutman, who was involved with, well, he was a friend of Graham's. He knew Rima Rima. He's been around the music business and,
Yes.
for a long time. So I'd known him off and on for 30 odd years. He came along. My friend Tony came along. All sorts of people came along, as well as people that would have been there anyway.
Yeah.
But what happened was that just gave me a little bit of confidence. I told my friend Gerard in Leeds that I'd done this, and he said, "Oh, well, if you're up for that, I know this guy that puts on interviews. You play a couple of songs afterwards, and it's quite well paid, and would you want to do it?" So I said, "Okay." So I did that. I did a couple of those, and again, the audience was like so enthusiastic. They sat there. Laurie came to the first one with me. She said she could not believe that a room full of 250 people didn't make a noise the whole time I was talking. She said there was no clinking of glasses, no people ordering at the bar, nothing. They sat there completely rapt.
Yes.
So it just, and they were, very happy afterwards. I signed stuff for them. It was a very nice experience. And they were obviously very enthusiastic and wanted to know when I was going to do something. So these tapes that I made this album from are, they've been sitting around. My friend Tony actually put them onto CD for me, I think, in the late 90s, because I was afraid the tapes were going to degrade. But when we came to do it, John at Tiny Global said, you can't really use MP3s to make vinyl in particular. You have to have WAV files, which I'd never heard of. So we got somebody else to master it with these WAV files, which is just much better quality. They're bigger files.
Yes.
So it was just one step. And Vince, actually, who came to that gig, got in touch with John Robb and asked him what companies he'd recommend for us. And he said the one that Alan McGee and Youth are putting together, or Tony Global. Well, Alan McGee wasn't interested, so he went to Tony Global and he jumped at it. And
Genius.
He's very good to work with.
Yes, well, he's a lovely, lovely chap, actually, isn't he? So, yes, he's got an amazing roster of bands. God, so that must have been brilliant. And was it really enjoyable, sort of hearing the kind of remastered versions on WAV?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's weird for me because it's, not only did I write them, but and record them and play them live in the 80s, but they're part of me. So for somebody else, they sit down and listen to, to them is fresh music. I've been living with it for 30 odd years. So but it's great to have them recorded and, on something a little bit more permanent than a cassette tape.
Yes, and it's coming out. And the artwork, whose idea was the artwork on the album?
They asked me for photos, and I thought the strongest photos I had, I mean, I probably got more, but it's finding them, were those two of me on the front and Linda on the back, which we shot actually in this room. I took the one of Linda, she took the one of me. We did a lot of our own artwork in the 80s.
Okay. I haven't seen the back.
Gabby, John's partner, took the photos, and John had this idea of it being a little bit similar to Tightrope, which was a gold record with a sleeve with a picture in the middle. He wanted to be that stark, and he was thinking of Red very early on. And so Gabby put that together, and I think it's very successful.
Brilliant. My God. So is it coming out? I mean, normally these things, you can get the MP3s. Is it CD and vinyl it will be coming out on?
Yeah, and it'll be streamed as well, yeah.
Streamed. We love a bit of streaming, don't we? God. And does that mean that you've got potentially dates that you're going to be performing as well to promote
The
it?
only one at the moment, although I am rehearsing musicians, we've got the JMB, the John McKay band. We have Rebellion, definitely. But yeah, I'm looking for an agent. I may have found one recently, so I'm hoping we can just get some playing in before Rebellion. I'm sure.
Yes. What's the lineup? What sort of is the lineup at the moment?
It's regular guitar, bass, and drums. Me on guitar, Billy King on bass, Yola on drums, who plays with Adamant.
Oh yeah.
And she also plays with the Priscillas, and Jen from the Priscillas is the vocalist. Well, we share vocals.
My God, does it feel exciting being in, sort of rehearsing with quite a new lineup?
It does, and we get on very well. And yes, it's a real pleasure to rehearse.
Yes. And have you bought any new musical instruments in the last year?
I have bought a couple of new Hagstrums, actually. I have still got a Les Paul, which I bought at the end of the 80s, I think. But they're so heavy. Yeah, I love them, but it does your shoulder in. So I've gone back to Hagstrums for now.
Yes. And have you enjoyed sort of rediscovering your love of music and creating sounds again?
Yeah, I kind of never left that, but because I did fiddle around while I was not doing much, I'd still sort of write the odd song. I played every now and again, but doing that and actually rehearsing and having to get sort of match fit is a completely different thing.
Yes, match fit. Does that, with this material, obviously this goes back just 40 years, which is boggling. Is there kind of songs that you want to write or feel like you want to write now that relate to how you are in this moment, so to speak?
Yeah. I've written quite a few, actually.
Have you got a new album in you that you feel like you want to, with this particular lineup as well?
Yeah. I've got a few of the older songs, which I've played a couple of them to the band, and they go, "Oh, what's that?" I say, "Well, that's actually an old one, but it never was recorded."
Right.
So they haven't got the sort of spectre of somebody else having played on it because it wasn't recorded properly, or at all.
Yes.
So there's a few of those, and I've got, well, the last count I had probably 15 songs, so that's more than enough for an album.
Yeah. Have you? I mean, because there's a couple of albums that have been released, one recently and one about 15 years ago. No, 10 years ago. That from like David Bowie's Black Star album to the latest Cure album, which seemed to capture a moment in their lives, that's happening now. I just wondered if you were sort of aware of either of those albums and how that might be influencing your kind of creative kind of moment or journey.
Yeah, I don't know, because as I say, there is a spread of old and new. And I don't tend to document my life very often in songs, although some of the songs that I have written are about Linda dying or the effect it's had on me. So there's probably a few of those. So that's obviously to do with my life. But some of the older ones are just subjects I'm interested in or feelings Linda and I had at the time.
Yes. There's a lot of emotional material, isn't there, that one deals with in these situations. And do you probably never toured America during your...
No.
Would you sort of, if you got the chance to do any dates abroad, would you sort of go for those at all?
Yeah, I mean, with Zorgable, we played a bit in Europe. I'd like to do that again, and I'd love to play East Coast, West Coast of America. I shouldn't think Middle America would like me much.
Probably not, but no, I just wondered if because there seems to be such an interest now, and people are sort of of discovering it who weren't even born then, are discovering the music at that time, and there's just a lot of interest. I mean, bizarrely, I went to that punk museum in Las Vegas last year when I had a holiday. Hurrah! First one in years. And I went there and it was quite an amazing, they had got an amazing collection, but I realised that people are keeping this, this material and these memories alive in different forms, one being a museum. Obviously, there's even the film on Rima Rima, which was quite amazing. I don't know, have you seen it?
No, I haven't actually. No.
Oh, well, I'll send you. Well, I won't send you the film because I don't have it, but there's a fantastic trailer for it, which is quite fascinating because they only lasted 8 months and did one EP, and someone managed to make a film from it. So
Linda actually managed them.
Did she?
Yeah. So I'm quite familiar with them and their songs. I saw them play live.
Right, my God! So you would have been right there in the Rima Rima story.
Yeah, Unfortunately, I'm not sure. Apart from Marc, I'm not sure they liked me much because, firstly, I kind of took Linda away from them. They thought because she was managing them, and when Kenny and I left, that kind of put the mockers on that because they were going to go on the tour. She got them on the tour, on the Join Hands tour,
right?
Because she knew Niels anyway. But through me as well. They were going to be on the tour. I was going to meet them up in, I think, Birmingham, which was like about, I don't know, a third through the tour or something. It was only a couple of weeks after the tour started. Which is the other reason why I would never have left, I mean, if I'd actually been thinking about it and been logical about it, which I wasn't, I was beyond logic by then, but I mean, leaving all my guitars and everything behind, and then stranding Linda with this, responsibility, which she could then not go through with, and it kind of it wrecked a lot of people.
When you put it like that, yes, I guess. But then in the heat of a moment, you wonder how much you're going to take in a situation. It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, none of that occurred to me at the time.
It wouldn't have done. When someone smacks you in the back, you just think, don't do that again. I'm not your dirt. Anyway, yes, it's right. So she managed Rima Rima for that 8 month period. But I think Marco also, because I've done an interview with Marco, and he absolutely hated the band and was desperate to leave to go to Adamant anyway. So
yeah.
So he wasn't
he was ready to go. Yeah, it wouldn't have lasted anyway. But I think I got some of the blame. And then when we were looking for management in the 80s, Linda and I went to this guy called Raf Edmonds, who was from Manchester, and we walked into the office, and he was obviously quite annoyed to see us. And we couldn't really understand. It was this undertow of sort of aggressiveness. And it turned out that he and most of Manchester seemed to blame me and Kenny for splitting up Magazine. And how they worked that one out, I don't know, because John McGeoch didn't leave and join the Banshees until well after Kenny and I left. But somehow it became our fault that Magazine had split up. I was actually a big fan of Magazine. That's another, collateral damage that I would never have predicted or wanted to happen.
No, God, I know. This just one little thing that happens in the universe could just spark,
Yeah, the butterfly effect.
The butterfly, that's the one, isn't it? Yes, God, who would have known? I don't know, how did we get onto that anyway? God, I can't remember. Anyway, da-da-da, that's the 80s. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's good. I think that's brilliant. Well, thank you, John, for your time. This has been amazing. Leaving it on Rima Rima. Dorothy's got a book out as well, by the way. So
yeah, she has. Yeah, I bought
it. And Marco's in the process of writing his.
Amongst those tapes, the old tapes, I actually found a couple of Rima Rima tapes, which I then got in touch with Marco, and he said, talk to Max. I did, and I met her at the Tate Modern and gave her these tapes, and they actually turned out, I think, to be tapes that they already used to make. I don't know if they made a record as well, didn't they?
They managed to get a compilation a few years ago.
I think it was the same tapes that they'd already used. A couple of demo tapes that Linda had.
Yes,
but I felt it belonged back with them.
Well, absolutely. But you did work with Mick Allen, didn't you, from Rima Rima? So that was after they had broken up as well. Yeah. So it was a bit hard, mate. I think people have let go of that now, haven't they? They've moved on. I hope so. God, I do as well. Has the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, has the Banshees ever been part of that? Well, I kind of can't keep track of it all.
I've no idea. That's not something I keep track of at all.
No, I know The Cure got inducted in it a few years ago, and I don't know who gets inducted, but it's an American thing, isn't it? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's a murky one. Who knows? We're not so big. Anyway, look, thank you ever so much. I hope the album goes really well, and I hope your tour also goes well for the summer, all live dates, and the new album gets some sort of traction, because that would be brilliant. And I guess you'd hope to stay on Tiny Global for that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
If it all trunk. Well, look, thank you for your time, and all the best for the release in May, isn't it?
Yeah, May the 8th, I think.
May the 8th. Sounds like something from Star Wars, doesn't it? May the 4th. Right. Okay, look, have a lovely weekend and take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you.
And that, dear listener, is pure rock and roll, and also a beautiful ending. That was me in conversation with John McKay from, yes, that punk band from the late 70s. And as we mentioned throughout that, there's this new album that's going to be coming out very soon on Tiny Global, which is going to be titled Sixes and Sevens, available on the website and various other social media platform places, I'm sure. Bandcamp's always a good one. Do check it out. The C86 Show, if you want to contact me, you can on all the usual platform sites. And also all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. It's exciting. Have a great week. Stay safe.